Okay, thank you very much for having me. I'm Steve Emerman, I teach at Utah Valley University, and I'm very happy to participate in the meeting of SLCC RSU. This is the third time I've spoken to this chapter, and I'm very supportive of the aims and work of SLCC RSU, and I'm very glad you invited me. Sarah said earlier that I would give a lecture on education for revolution, which is sort of I'm doing. But I want to point out that actually is an oxymoron. It's a contradiction. To say you're going to lecture on the use of education for revolutionary transformation. The reason I say that is that at UVU, we have, I guess you call it an organization called Teaching Academy. And I went through Teaching Academy my first year at UVU, and now I'm a facilitator for Teaching Academy. And what we do is we teach any professors who want to the latest ideas about education and how it's accomplished and how it's not accomplished. And we're talking a little bit more about this later. And really there's thousands of studies showing that the lecture is the least effective means of transmitting information, okay? So we really teach people how to teach without lecturing. So we start off Teaching Academy by saying that we're not going to give a lecture on how to not give a lecture. Okay, we're going to teach Teaching Academy the way that you actually would teach a course, in a way that actually does promote growth and transmit information. I mean, really, you find very few people, if any, who would defend lecturing in terms of its educational benefits. Okay, lecturing persists because it's a tool of reaction. Okay, lecturing is a means of enforcing a socioeconomic hierarchy. That is, it's your job to look at me and listen, and it's my role to be the one who transmits information to you. Okay, so lecturing is a way of reinforcing that hierarchy. What I'm hoping is that I'll lecture for a bit, but eventually I want this to kind of evolve into something actually more beneficial. Okay, that is actually kind of a lot of interaction and discussion between us. And that is why I asked Jake to not have the camera just facing on me, because it's not all about me. Okay, when someone asks a question or they have an extended comment or a concern, I'd rather that they be the focus of the camera. Okay, and it might be a little technologically difficult, but you'll do the best you can, right, Jake? Mm-hmm. Okay. I am very interested. I want to say some things I hope are useful to you. I know that RSU does have some educational program. I see this on Facebook. You read books together and so on. Who organizes this? Is this Comrade Greg?
Whoever wants to.
I see. Okay. I'll tell you what. I'm very interested in what you're doing. Okay, and I'm very interested in whether and how you're using reading of revolutionary books to actually promote revolutionary transformation. Okay, so what I'd like to do is kind of lay out some ideas about what is the education that promotes revolutionary transformation, and then have some discussion about how you're doing, what your objectives are, how you meet those objectives, and so on. Okay? Not to draw the attention on you, I asked who organizes it, and it was Comrade Greg. Okay, so let me kind of start with a little bit of a story, and then we'll get to some other big ideas. So I have degrees from Princeton and from Cornell. So I guess you could say that I have gone through the best that the American capitalist system has to offer. Okay. When I first went to Princeton, I was very surprised to hear this expression. People would talk about the gentleman's C. Okay, they would say so and so earned the gentleman's C. Not he got a C, but he got a gentleman's C. Or some TA would be saying, I have to give so and so a gentleman's C. Or someone saying, I earned my gentleman's C. Not a C, but a gentleman's C. Okay? And I was really confused. Well, what does that mean? A gentleman's C. Okay? I was really confused about what that meant for a while. okay? Now, has anyone ever heard that expression? Because I've never heard it in Utah. Okay, you have, Alyssa?
I have, but not in Utah
Where?
either. Florida.
And what university was that at?
It's actually out of high school
Ah, very interesting.
in St. Johns County, if that makes a difference.
Very, very interesting, okay? It's kind of an Ivy League thing, it's a bit of an East Coast thing, okay? You might hear it in a movie or novels about collegiate life, like by F. Scott Fitzgerald or others, okay? But I was very confused about what this meant, okay? Especially thinking about the context in which it comes up. And I'm going to tell you the context. I'm very interested in how this figured at the high school level, okay? It's often said about many of our former presidents or presidential candidates that they got the gentleman's C, okay? I mean, many presidents or potential presidents have gotten C grades in university. Elder Bush, younger Bush, Al Gore, John Kerry, Franklin Roosevelt, okay? I mean, actually, most have been C students, okay? You have some notable exceptions, John F. Kennedy, Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter. Think a bit about exactly why those are exceptions, okay? But all of these presidents or almost presidents earned the gentleman's C, okay? And I was always very curious, well, what exactly does that mean, okay? And why does it only apply to certain people? Because you have students who get C's, but then others get the gentleman's C, okay? So what is that all about? And then I kind of finally figured it out, that what we're doing at Princeton, us students, what we're doing is we're learning how to become highly paid and very competent and very effective and very loyal servants of the ruling class. And if you're an A student, you have achieved very well the status of a loyal, competent, and eventually highly paid servant of the ruling class, okay? Now, but what if you are in the ruling class? You don't want an A. You're nobody's servant, okay? You are the ruling class, okay? You're here to meet and network with the people who are going to serve you, okay? You're the last person who wants an A, okay? Actually getting an A is actually a way of denying that you are in the ruling class. That's what the gentleman's C is, okay? That's why the Bushes, elder Bush and younger Bush, both get the gentleman's C. Well, they're in the ruling class. They're not here to learn how to become anyone's servant. They're here to make contacts and network and so on, okay? It's interesting why Clinton, Kennedy, Carter are exceptions. In many ways, I would say that they saw themselves as servants of the ruling class and not actually part of the ruling class, like I'd say the Bushes did, okay? Can you help me out now, Alyssa? How did this play out at the high school level?
It sounds like it was probably just something like a misuse of the phrase.
I see,
But
okay.
no, it was a written assignment. It wasn't me. It was somebody else I knew that had turned in a written assignment, and the professor was kind of saying, "Well, I don't feel like you really followed the instructions, so I don't feel comfortable really giving you like an A, but I can tell you put in a lot of effort. So why don't we settle on a gentleman's C?" Is the phrase that was used.
That's interesting. I wonder what he thought he meant by that. Okay, it sounds like a line out of Great Gatsby. Very interesting. Okay, now, anyway, just keep in mind what I said about Princeton and universities like that, okay? Now, I want to start off with what I think is the most important word in the English language, and that word is ideology. Okay, I'd say the three most important words are love, energy, and ideology. Okay, and it's probably worth starting every morning and ending every night thinking about what those three words mean. Okay, I believe that right now at this very moment, Chris Manor is giving a lecture on ideology at UVU. Okay, so very interesting. We had just about parallel meetings. Okay, so we are probably not saying anything very different. Okay, so ideology, I'm going to say, is one of the most important words in English. Okay, its companion word is hegemony. Okay, we're thinking about what both of these mean. Okay, so I want to start with ideology. Okay, I saw Greg posted, he posted on Facebook on ideology. I understand what you said, I understand the comments, like, what are you guys talking about, okay? What kind of friends?
Okay, first off,
Yes,
they're not friends.
okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
then second off, it's a long lit cigarette battle that goes on.
That's fine, okay. Okay, so let's just start with this question. What does that word mean, ideology? Okay, just tell me a few things. What do you associate with that word? Tell me some things about this. Sorry, what's your name?
Well,
Will. Okay, tell me, Will.
the only two words I can really think I could associate that with would be idiot or quite possibly ideology.
I'm not sure whether idiot and ideology,
Or ideology was the other one I meant.
Ideology.
Yeah.
Is that a different word from ideology? Are we just pronouncing it?
No, like ideals.
And now, sorry, now I understand. Okay. I'm very curious about whether there's a connection between idiot and ideology, so I'm not quite sure. Okay, but I'm gonna take some notes, okay, so we get to come back to it. Yeah, Adrian?
What does ideology mean?
I will tell you shortly.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to kind of see have you heard the word before? What context have you heard it in? Yeah, what's your name?
I'm Cannon.
Cannon, yeah.
I generally associate ideologies with worldviews, perhaps opinions, prejudices, especially in relation to certain topics.
Like what topics?
Any political topic, your opinions of people,
Okay.
the way you think the world works.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, I think I've heard.
I've missed you.
I'm Greg.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard ideology used in that sense, and I think that seems to be like the more common, at least in American vernacular. I think like people talking.
It is. Okay,
Yeah.
it's actually not what I'm going to mean,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to say in a bit why I'm not going to mean that. Okay, just want to add, Sarah?
I was just gonna say, I think of ideology as more, like Cannon was saying, a political or economic, like principle, like set of principles, as opposed to like other, like, I don't know, more like social or like religious. I would feel like you would use a different word, like moral or something. So ideology is more of
Okay,
a political or economic context.
okay, yeah, Greg?
I was just gonna say that I've also heard it in another sense that I don't
Yeah.
think I fully understood, like in
Okay.
like Zizek lectures or something where he was.
Tell me.
It seemed like he was using it in a sense like some sort of worldview that you don't realize that you have, or some kind of
Okay,
like a frame of mind that you view the world through, that you don't even realize you're viewing it through this lens or something
Okay.
like that.
okay, I'm going to say something similar.
Okay.
Okay, other ideas? Okay, great, okay. So kind of what I've heard so far is that ideology might be connected with idiot or idiocy, okay? Maybe it is, I'm not sure, but certainly that's not a compliment, okay? That it's a worldview, it's an opinion, it's something political, not social or moral, but also it's like a worldview that you didn't even realize that you had, okay? Now, I want to kind of lay out a definition of ideology, and I'll talk about how it's connected with the ideas I've heard so far, okay? Ideology is used in different senses. I'm going to use it in the Marxist sense, okay? And the key book on this is the book by Marx called On the German Ideology. Okay, have you guys ever studied that book, Greg? Oh, you have? Okay, excellent book, okay? So the way Marx defines ideology is he says that ideology is the set of beliefs that justify the existence of a ruling class. Okay? So it's not just any worldview, any political view, any opinion. It's a particular type of worldview. It's a worldview whose purpose is to justify the existence and perpetuation of a ruling class. Okay? Now, I think that we could certainly disagree about exactly who is in the ruling class. Okay? Especially as these people who are very highly paid, well-trained servants of the ruling class, are they actually in the ruling class or aren't they? Okay, certainly we can have differences along those lines, we can discuss those lines, but I think that to deny the existence of a ruling class is just simply absurd. Okay, I mean, to say that in any society that all people have equal access to power and privilege and resources, I think is simply absurd. Okay, so I'd say it's a pretty commonplace and correct view that all societies have a ruling class. Okay, now the question is, when you ask, why is there a ruling class? Why are these people in charge? Why do these people have more power and resources and assets than everybody else? What people say, that's called the ideology. Okay, it's beliefs that justify that. Okay, now I'm kind of going to say why I sort of criticize this usage of ideology as any worldview. Okay, I'd like to say that's what they say. Okay, that's what the people who support the existence of ruling class say, is, well, all kinds of people have worldviews. They have an ideology, we have an ideology. We're saying no, the ideology is what justifies your existence. That what justifies the existence of a ruling class. Okay, I had an excellent professor when I was at university at Princeton. He defined ideology as a denial of reality. Okay, we said the reality is nobody has a right to an excessive amount of power and privilege and resource and assets. So anything you say that justifies that, that's a denial of reality. Okay, so I'm not saying that ideology is any worldview. I'm saying they have ideology, but what we have is reality. Okay, so those are two different ways of looking at things. Now, I mean, the interesting thing is how it is that we all accept the ideology. Okay, you ask people, man on the street, capitalist system. There are people with a great deal of wealth, privilege, access to resources, power. Why do they have this? Why are they entitled to this? Okay, they'll give you a set of answers. That's called ideology. Okay, I mean, the question is, well, why do we accept that? Okay, why do people who are not in the ruling class, accept that the ruling class has a legitimate exercise of power? Because why do people believe something that acts against their interests? Yeah, Adrian, tell me.
Because some people think that if they work hard enough, they can get there, while others think that there's absolutely nothing that they can do about it, so they might as well just accept it.
Okay, so I'd say that's actually part of the ideology. Okay, I mean, you actually said two things, both of which are part of the ideology. Okay, one part is that, well, anybody who works hard can become wealthy. Okay, so the people who are wealthy, who have access to power, they're that way because they've worked hard, meaning they've earned it. Okay, that's part of their ideology. Okay, another part of the ideology, which I'd say is the most important part of all, is the idea that there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, which could be either there's nothing you can do about it because you're helpless. Okay, you have no power, you're powerless. But really, an essential part of any ideology is that there really aren't any alternatives. The way the world is, that's just the natural way that things have to be. Okay? There can't be any other kind of world. It's just the way it has to be. It's just human nature. Okay? Will, tell me.
From going back to what you were saying a little bit, by your definition of what you say ideology.
It's Marx's definition, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds almost dogmatic to me, as far as like, when you say like an upper class or a higher, ruling class, it sounds almost like that's a subjugation to me of, how the lack of education, that most people receive, and through generations of, being subjected to laboring for their ends and means, that seems to be the biggest issue as to why there is a ruling class, because there's some people that are bred into it generationally, and then there's some that are generationally impoverished as well, so it's a double-edged sword.
Okay, good, okay. There's actually kind of two separate questions, okay? We could ask, why is there a ruling class? Okay, and we could ask it in terms of historical reasons. How did that come about? How did they gain power? How did they retain power? Okay. And we could talk about this, and we would be talking about reality. That's not ideology, that's reality, okay? Ideology is when you defend someone's right to be part of a ruling class, okay? You're saying that their power, their access to resources, that is legitimate. They have a right to do that, okay? It has to be that way. There's no other way it can be.
I see.
Okay, that's ideology,
Right.
okay? So I like the way a professor laid it out for me a long time ago, contrasting ideology versus reality. Okay, we okay with that?
Yeah, no, that makes
Okay,
sense.
okay.
I apologize.
No, it's fine, it's fine. No, it's important, no, that's an excellent question, okay? Okay, it's a very important distinction there, okay? Now, if you ask most people in this country, why are there wealthy people? Why are there people who have more access to resources than others? They would basically present to you the ideology. Okay, they would see things like people with wealth, they worked hard, they would go on and on, okay, about, black sort of criminal element and on and on and on and on, okay? That's why certain people have power and others don't, okay? Well, they would sort of defend the legitimacy of it, okay? Now, most people who would defend it aren't part of the ruling class. So why are they defending that, okay? This brings up our next word, which is hegemony, okay? Now, hegemony is the process by which people are taught the ideology, okay? So no one is born believing that it's human nature that anybody only acts for their own economic benefit. You're taught that. You're not born that way, okay? No one's born thinking that white people are simply naturally better at academics than non-white people. I mean, you're taught that, okay? All parts of this ideology, you're taught that, okay? You could have been taught something different, but you live in a society that doesn't exist yet, okay? So the process by which you're taught the ideology is called hegemony, okay? Now, and I'm just going to kind of give an example of this, okay? Is that the key part of any ideology, as I said before, is thinking there's no alternatives, okay? That society just couldn't be any way different than it is now, okay? And how does one accomplish a revolution or even ask questions or challenge anything if you're certain that there aren't any alternatives, okay? Now, in a sense, ideology, this is what I think Zizek is talking about, okay, or others, is ideology is like the policeman in your head, okay? So you don't need someone policing your actions, your thoughts, your writing, who you associate with, etc., if you already have in your head that whoever's in power has legitimate right to the power and there's no other way the world could be, okay? Just to give an example, I was teaching, I was a guest speaker in environmental studies class at UVU. It's not the one that Chris Manor was in. It was the next year. And I just asked them a question. I said, can you imagine that in the future there could be an overthrow of the US government by environmental radicals and they would reform American society along environmentally sustainable lines? Can you imagine that? Can anyone imagine that? Tell me a story, just imagine how it could happen, okay? And only one student could even imagine how it could happen, okay? And he was not an American student, okay? He was from Bangladesh, if that matters, okay? But I kind of kept emphasizing, I'm not asking you to join an organization, make a contribution, assassinate someone. Just use your imagination, just imagine. Just tell a story how it could happen, okay? And no one could even imagine such a thing, okay? Well, that's called being a victim of hegemony. That you can't even imagine how things could change, okay? What's that?
Limitations.
It's right, okay, yeah, Adrian?
I was gonna say, most people are taught not to question authority.
Okay.
And they're taught not to
Okay.
really deviate
Okay.
from anything, so at one point in your life, if you just keep that habit up, At one point in your life, you're just completely incapable of seeing anything else but what has been taught to you multiple times.
Right, okay, right, so you're taught the ideology, okay, and that's a process of hegemony. Okay, exactly right, I like the way you put it, okay? And keep kind of going with this, Adrian, okay? It's like where is this accomplished? Where is this accomplished, this don't question the authority, don't challenge the system, don't ask questions? Where is this accomplished?
Through
It's-
either,
It's either in the school system or
Okay.
by your parents,
Okay,
depending on your parents.
well, I would add one more source.
okay, yeah, Will?
Your parents or parental figures, the educational system itself, and any mass media that you see every day, it's subjected or projected to you.
Okay, so mass media and parents and educational system, did you want to add to that, Alyssa?
I was just gonna add media and politics.
And mass media certainly, and Ian?
Other people who have already been educated into the ideology.
Okay, right, as in your older brothers and sisters, okay.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
just in general.
Environmental.
Okay, your friends, your peer group, yeah,
Society.
exactly right, okay, yeah, Cannon?
I would add religious institutions to that
And
list.
church also, certainly, okay. So those are all avenues by which hegemony is accomplished, okay? Now, this is what I want us to think about very carefully. This is why I'm very glad to be talking with you right after you were talking about your program of demanding education for all, okay? Is that you have to think about, there's a contradiction here, okay? There's a contradiction between demanding education and at the same time demanding more of a place where ideological indoctrination is going to happen. Okay, I just kind of think about this, okay? But I don't mean this to criticize demanding education for all, because I support that entirely, okay? Yeah, Adrian?
Sorry to interrupt you, but
Please.
yes, education for all is a great idea, but maybe we should work to reform the way that things are in like the early grades of school where they indoctrinate you the most.
Okay,
Just from my experience of it, that's where they beat you down the hardest is elementary school, where you're all a bunch of hyperactive little kids with ADD or ADHD, and you're all
Okay.
troublemakers and.
Oh God, the
Okay.
transformation theory.
right, okay. I mean, actually, I'm agreeing with you. There's an excellent book on this subject called Weapons of Mass Instruction, okay, which is quite excellent. In that that's the whole idea is where did mass education come from? Especially where did compulsory education come from, okay? Compulsory education anywhere in the world is first instituted in Prussia after the 1848 revolution, okay? Where basically after the Prussian right wing regains power, they basically say to the workers, you guys march in the streets all you want, but we're gonna teach your children. And we're gonna make you send your children to us where we're gonna teach them, okay? That was the explicit purpose of compulsory education, was the transmission of what Marx called the German ideology, okay? That's how compulsory education starts. And it's brought to America by various people who study and observe and went to Prussia to learn about the Prussian educational system and how it was being used to suppress workers' revolution. And they brought it to America with exactly that stated purpose. Okay, that really was not, that was not a cover-up at all. That was the original purpose of compulsory education, okay, was the prevention of workers' revolution. And I'd say in America it was amazingly successful. Okay, I mean, it's a very interesting question is, why has there been no revolution in America since the bourgeois revolution of 1776? And I say certainly the educational system has been very effective in accomplishing that. Okay, yeah, Adrian?
I was gonna say from what I've noticed, society and your education system, but society tends to teach you to be smart enough
Uh-huh.
to get a job,
Uh-huh.
but not too smart. Because if you're too smart, people don't like you.
Okay.
And if you're
If
too
you're
smart,
too smart, you wouldn't get a job. You would start your company according to the American.
Oh yeah, because you can't even get an entry-level job nowadays if you're too smart, because they want to be able to boss you around.
Okay. I actually, Adrian, I'll tell you what, you actually are just one step ahead of me. No, you're doing. I like it. Okay. You're right, but you're outrunning me a tiny bit. Okay. I'm really going to say exactly what you said. I'm just going to kind of put it in my own way. Okay. I was saying that from a revolutionary standpoint, there's a contradiction regarding demanding education. Okay. I want to say next that the capitalist system also has its contradictions, which is pretty much exactly what you pointed out. Okay. But they've handled their contradictions pretty well thus far. Okay. So what I was saying is a contradiction between saying that hegemony and the transmission of ideology is accomplished through the educational system, including the higher educational system, and demanding higher education for all. Okay, because in a sense, it's kind of demanding ideological training for all. Okay, and keep in mind that I'm using ideology always in the sense of a bad thing. Okay. Now, at the same time, I said that I certainly support education for all, okay? I certainly support your goal of scholarships for undocumented immigrants, absolutely, okay? You have to think of it as a kind of incrementalism, that is, you sort of make one demand at a time, but that only makes sense in the context of having some overall vision as to where it is you want to go, okay? So yes, education for all. But now, at some point, they're talking about, well, what kind of education? Education for what purpose? Education in whose interests? Okay, those are the questions that we have to be asking. Okay, now, as Adrian pointed out, which I was very happy to hear, okay, that capitalism also has its contradictions, and I'm going to say two important ones. Okay, so first of all, capitalist system wants to accomplish the ideological training which will happen in the educational system. Okay? What kind of ideological training? Teaching people how to work for themselves, by themselves, for their own benefit, rather than collaborating with a team or working for the good of the team. Being told that, well, it's just human nature, that you always work in your benefit. Okay, reinforcing this social hierarchy, economic hierarchy, that's your place to sit and look at someone talking and listen to that person, okay, and not respond. Or I do like hearing from Adrian, but it seems like you were taught to apologize when you respond to someone talking to you. Okay, there's no need to do that, okay? I mean, being taught that there's always one right answer, and then the guy in front of the room has the right answer, or that there's one right answer that you're supposed to choose out of 3 or 4 alternatives, and we will supply you with those alternatives. Okay, I mean, those are all means of ideological training, okay? So what the capitalist system wants to do is provide this ideological training, but not too much, provide you with the skills and the tools that you need to advance economically and actually economically or socially challenge the ruling class. Okay? So that is teach you, but not teach you too much. As Adrian was saying, not teach you to be too smart. Okay? At the same time, provide you with this ideological training. And I have to say that in this respect, the capitalist system has been amazingly successful at accomplishing this, okay? Because how common it is to meet someone who can recite to you as if it's the most obvious thing, that of course it's human nature that everybody only works for their own economic benefit, okay? Well, that's a perfect piece of ideology, okay? They can recite that, no question whatsoever, but don't know algebra, can't critically read a book, can't write an essay, can't give a presentation. Okay, so they've absorbed that ideology entirely, but did that without any skills coming with it. Okay, so capitalism has been amazingly successful in that regard. Yes, Kyle?
I want to point out another contradiction
I guess to what you were talking about.
I will also.
There's
Okay,
another
please. Yeah.
tendency, I think, like de-skilling occupations that gradually did require skills. And my girlfriend's studying to be a teacher. She's getting a master's degree in order to get, a job as a secondary school teacher. And they teach you, I mean, it's 2 years, it's fairly intense, you're doing all kinds of student teaching and everything. And at the same time, they're telling you that you have to teach, you have to practically conjugate this verb, at this hour, this day, this week, and you have to move on to the next verb, the next 5 minutes, and then you have to be on the next same subject. So they're telling you you need a degree, and you need to spend all this money, and you need to learn all these things, but the actual skills that you're required to do are just reading and reciting a lesson plan that's been prepared
Right,
for
okay.
you. So
Right,
they're
right.
educating, eventually, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that any education beyond like the most basic, reading and speaking and arithmetic becomes too much, because there's, this tendency to de-skill as many occupations as you can. And I see
Right.
that kind of counteracting a little bit what you're saying. Not
Right.
completely, but just.
Okay, no. Oh, okay. I was okay till you said it counteracted what I was saying, because I think we're agreeing on everything.
Well, I'm just saying it's more like, I don't know, like in terms of physics, like there's this huge force, we need to, put as much ideology in as many brains as possible. And to that extent, we need all this education. But there's also this other small kind of countervailing force, like, people need all this education so that they can have the right attitude, but at the same time, this education is increasingly becoming less necessary for the jobs that they're actually being asked to do. Like, does that make sense? In the sense of teaching specifically, because that's supposed to be a creative profession, and now it's becoming less and less creative. But the educational requirement, the ideology requirement is still there.
I think we're in total agreement.
Yeah, I just thought
In total agreement, okay. Right, so what the capitalist system wants to do is provide ideological training, okay, without actually providing what I call critical thinking skills, okay, or essential revolutionary skills, okay, things like writing an essay, giving a presentation, critically reading a book, etc., okay. Now, like what you're talking about, I'm in total agreement, okay. I mean, I agree that it's happening. I think it's a good thing, okay? But the educational system is progressively being turned into a factory, okay? Which is a tendency even going on pretty steadily since the 1960s, okay? Basically what you're describing is primary or secondary school being turned into a kind of McDonald's, okay? I mean, actually, all of society's been turned into McDonald's, okay? It is, okay? Where you just have certain slots you plug people into and they just perform the tasks that are assigned to them without any creativity, any thinking, any innovation, any initiative, okay? And that's been going on in primary and secondary schools for quite a while, okay? So obviously, teachers who can't work creatively, can't innovate, can't think critically, or are too afraid to, or have been taught not to, well, what kind of students are they going to produce? Well, not real creative thinkers, okay? And of course that is continued in higher education. I mean, actually everything that happens in primary and secondary education appears in about a decade in higher education, okay? I mean, you probably know that, I think nationwide like 70% of college courses are taught by adjuncts. Okay, and adjuncts are great people, okay? They actually are very creative, very critical thinkers. They're not allowed to act in that way, partly because they're so crunched for time, okay? They teach so many courses in such a small amount of time. Everything that they need is provided for them, okay? Like, well, here's your textbook, and here's the slides that come with that textbook, and here's the exam that comes with that textbook, and you just sort of act it out, okay? Well, they don't want to do that, but when they're teaching 8 courses at one time at 3 different institutions, well, that's what they're going to do, okay? This is called that the McDonaldization of education, okay? Are we in agreement?
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah.
I think so. Okay, good. Okay, so let's say that I think that the capitalist system has been very successful at this. Now, don't get too depressed, okay? Because I'm gonna actually propose some real suggestions at the end, okay? Now I said that at UVU we have a organization called Teaching Academy, where we basically teach other professors how to teach in terms of the latest research as to what is effective, how the brain works, what promotes creativity, what promotes critical thinking, and so on, okay? I want to say this, we call it learner-centered teaching. I want to say a little bit about it just because then I want to talk about what are the problems with it, okay? So the kind of thing, it's kind of got 4 parts to it. One part is the role of the instructor. What is the instructor? What is his role? He or she is someone who has all the answers, who transmits the answers to people who accept whatever he or she says, or is the instructor more like a coach, more like a mentor, more like taking other people's ideas, helping to develop them, helping promote them, helping people grow, okay? And we talk about the balance of power. Does every single rule, everything that happens in the classroom, is that supposed to be decided by the instructor? Okay, and you think about what kind of message comes across when first day of class, instructor hands out a syllabus where every single rule is laid out. Okay, every single problem is anticipated, which here's the rule, here's the consequences. Is that teaching people how to live in democratic society? Well, I wouldn't say it is. It's actually teaching people how to do everything that you're told, which is what I think Adrian was talking about before. Okay, another aspect is what is the function of content? Okay, in a university course, you're teaching some material, some factual knowledge. What's its purpose? Is the factual knowledge an end in itself, or is the factual knowledge just a vehicle for developing critical thinking skills or writing skills or presentation skills? We also talk about the responsibility for learning. Is it the teacher's responsibility to make people learn, force them to learn, penalize them for not learning? Or is that the student's responsibility? Is that a shared responsibility? Also talking about assessment, testing, exams. What's that all about? What's it for? Is it about separating sheep from goats, or seeing where someone is at, telling them how to revise, letting them have at it again, giving more feedback, letting them revise again? So those are all things we talk about in learner-centered teaching. And well, professors are all about it. Okay, well, why not? Okay, it sounds like the greatest thing, and it's not really so hard to learn how to do it. Okay, the big issue, the thing we spend a year, it's a year-long teaching academy, the thing we spend a year on is this huge amount of student resistance to learner-centered teaching. Many books on the subject, that's what the whole teaching academy is about, is when you replace lecturing and multiple choice exams and PowerPoint slides, kind of the standard package of education of the last few decades, with what I describe as learner-centered teaching, students will become very angry with you, and they will resist this in various ways, okay? The resistance is things like simply refusing to do assignments, encouraging other students to not do assignments, endlessly asking for clarification on assignments, endlessly saying, what exactly do you want? Insisting that it's the teacher's role to teach, and it's the student's role to sit and be quiet, that it's the teacher's role to give the students facts, and the student's role to memorize them and repeat them back. That's the resistance that you will get, okay? Is kind of what Adrian was talking about, is students come into university with very successful ideological training regarding who they are, what they're about, what their role is. And they will resist anyone who tries to offer them anything different, okay? So that's what our academy is about, is how one handles student resistance, okay? You actually handle it very similar to the way a revolutionary government would handle a right-wing counterinsurgency. I didn't mean that as a joke. I actually explained it in that way. Okay?
Go on.
Okay, I actually wasn't talking about that, okay? Because that's more like what we tell the teachers, okay? because often students might want to hear about something different. Okay, well, I'll tell you a little bit about this since it sounds like you're interested. Okay, yeah, great.
So this is not an academic class, and in fact,
Right now, yeah.
yeah, even though we're students, although
Yeah.
many of us aren't,
Uh-huh.
it's more important for us, at least for me,
Okay.
to learn how to engage people in this way
Okay.
than it is for me to learn like the student resistance, or maybe it's not, but like this
Okay.
is something I can use every day with everyone I talk to.
I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Will.
Just a quick question, I guess. You think that most students would be dejected, I guess, or would be react the way that they do to this kind of teaching out of mostly like a fear and a mechanism of fear? I mean, like
Oh,
because
okay.
they've been taught this all their lives, and normally any human being, they fear what they don't understand. Most do anyway.
Okay.
So it's like
Right. You're asking why is there resistance to what I call learner-centered teaching? Okay. I have some buddies who are writing a book about this as I speak. Okay. So I'm very eager to read their book. Okay. So I know they're talking about both cognitive reasons, that is, reasons that relate to the way brains develop, but mostly about cultural reasons. Okay. That you are trying to do something bad, okay, and they're resisting you're trying to do something bad to them, okay, and it's just a reflection of what they've always been taught about, who they are, what they're about, what their role is, okay. In some ways, students come into university actually knowing very well how to work the system, okay, that is how to anticipate what the teacher wants, how to repeat back what the teacher wants, how to get what they want, okay, how to get what they want without actually internalizing anything, okay, and but people are happy with their current ability to work the system. In a sense, kind of what I was saying before, don't really have a vision of a world that is something different than what they've been brought up with, okay? Now, since you're into it, I'll talk about, yeah, Adrian, please.
Sorry.
It's okay.
When I was in school, which was about 2 years ago now, when I was in school, I saw that they kind of split up people
Uh-huh.
into, well, it's more like people get split up into different groups. The average students, not like the honors or special ed kind of students, but the average student kind of just saw school as something they had to do.
Right, yeah.
Something that they had to do because their parents made them, because they wanted to get a good job, and once they're older in college, oh well, it's just something I have to do. You know, everyone always drilled it into their heads. Oh, you guys need to go to college. You need to go to college. And I know plenty of people who are just in college for that reason, because everyone always told them that they had to. And then you get the more advanced course students that are like, I'm going to work my bones off, basically.
Yeah.
Until I get that honors diploma and that honors degree and go on to be a doctor, lawyer, or whatever have you. Because I'm smart enough to make a lot of money, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, basically, what I mean to say is most people don't care about education. Unfortunately, like the average Joe does not care about education.
Yeah.
They just kind of see it as a chore. And that's what they do. They know how to get by. You know, you do your assignments, you comply with everything that they tell you to do for the most part. You go and you get your diploma and you're done.
Okay. There's a third group.
And what is that?
Okay. Okay. It's kind of like something that we used to say when I worked in I used to be an engineer. So when I worked in industry, is that in any organization, 60% of the organization is kind of just getting by. They're there. They're supposed to be there. They're getting the grade. They're getting a paycheck. they're on the way out the door. They're not really committed, but they're getting by. Okay? Then you got about 20% who are really committed to the mission of the organization. Okay? They're trying to really advance what the company is doing. They're trying to get as much knowledge as they can. Okay? That's 20%. But there's another 20% that are engaged in active sabotage. Okay? That is, they're actually sabotaging what the class is doing or what the company is doing. Okay? And they can be very influential on that kind of middle 60%. Okay? So when I talked about student resistance, I'm really talking about that 20% that can be very influential. Okay? That really insist that what this company is doing, what this classroom is doing is a very, very bad thing. And we will sabotage it at every opportunity. Okay? That's the third group. Okay? Now, I forgot your name? Al? Yeah?
Yeah. I just want to interject something. If you do have 20%
Yeah.
to make up that 100%, you have 20, 20, 60.
Yeah.
400%.
Okay.
For them to be successful at being saboteurs, then they have to be appearing to be loyal to basically keep their 20% number intact. Would you agree with that? Because they can't be obvious to be saboteurs or they'd be out.
Well, in the school system, they could.
I identify with that 20%.
I identify with it too. Okay.
So, I mean, I'm just kind of speaking for
Okay, that's part of what makes you an active.
Or outed.
Okay,
You know?
okay, that's part of what makes you an active, effective saboteur, is that you're superficially part of this organization.
Yes, you have to put on the air of being one of the team, as it were.
That's right. Okay, but not be so far off the team that anyone can
Exactly.
get rid of you.
Can't be,
Okay, there is a level of sabotage in a classroom while you're out the door. Okay, but by and large, what I call people actually resisting a learner-centered teaching are not out the door. Otherwise, they wouldn't be effective saboteurs.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I know you're interested in how teachers deal with student resistance, so I'll talk a little bit about this, okay? And how it is actually very much like how you would counter a right-wing counterinsurgency. A couple things to point out is, first of all, you can't think of resistance as simply something bad on the face of it, okay? You'd have to think about, you're trying to mentor someone, coach someone, train someone, teach someone, and if there's no resistance at all, are you really pushing them in any way? Are you really promoting their growth? And I say probably not. Okay, it might be a lot of feel-good stuff, but not much real growth is going on, I would guess. Okay, if I could make a plot, okay, on this y-axis I'm going to have intellectual growth, and on this x-axis I'll have resistance. Okay, so we have resistance increasing with growth, but at some point you're just getting too much resistance with a little bit of extra growth, and then at some point it just crashes, okay, where there's actually negative growth going on, and it's just all about the resistance, okay? I mean, so you really want to be at the point where there's some resistance, and I'd say that's certainly even true in a revolution organization, is providing some training, some coaching. If there's no resistance at all, you'd be a little concerned. I'm not really pushing you guys enough, okay? Now, what I want to kind of emphasize, the reason I'm using words like counterinsurgency, is that often what people think is that, see, that the instructor is in some position of power. Even if you're trying to institute a learner-centered teaching, a learner-centered environment, you're doing that from some position of power. Okay, you have something in mind that you want other people to do. Okay? There's sort of a very outdated view, even though it's widely practiced, okay, but an outdated view, that the way you get people to do what you want is you make the costs of not doing what you want much less than the benefits of doing what you want. Okay? So you do what I want, you get this benefit. You don't do what I want, here's the cost. And the costs are very high, and the benefits are very high. Okay, now that's kind of classic 1960s counterinsurgency. Okay, if we catch a single Viet Cong in your village, we will burn down the whole village. Okay, if you guys are Viet Cong free for a year, wow, you get a new school and health clinic. Okay, so that's American Vietnam, it's the British in Northern Ireland. Sorry to say it's Israel and Gaza. Okay, but it never works. Okay, it never works because people don't think that way. People don't go through that calculation, okay, of I will do whatever I have to do to get this benefit, and I'll do whatever I have to do to avoid this penalty, okay? People don't go through that calculation. If someone really did, you actually would think of them as a little mentally ill, okay? A little cold-blooded, a little robotic, okay? Because real people don't actually act that way, okay? And that's why this kind of counterinsurgency never works, okay? Because you keep making the penalties greater and greater, and they keep fighting back harder and harder, okay? In that, really, the way to get people to go along with what you want, or what you have in mind for them, and not to engage in this active sabotage, is they have to regard your exercise of power as legitimate. Okay, maybe a student doesn't like everything I do, but he or she still sees me as being legitimate. Okay, so I'd say there's kind of 3 key parts to legitimacy. Okay, the first is that if you don't like what's going on, you have a right to be heard. Okay, anyone who doesn't like learner-centered teaching, anyone who insists that it should be more like the old days, it should be more like something different, I will listen to you as long as you want to talk. Okay, maybe at some point I might say, well, you're just saying the same things over and over again, okay, but I'm willing to listen. Okay, I would never say, no, it's not even worth listening to you. Okay, so often people say that the most important part of being an effective leader is you're a good listener. Okay, that's part of being seen as legitimate, is your willingness to listen. There's 2 other parts to being legitimate. And that is you're being predictable, okay? If you do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. It's highly predictable, okay? Being seen as arbitrary or capricious or random is really a way of kind of delegitimizing yourself, okay? And the third part I'd say is being fair, okay? Fair being that you treat all people the same, okay? You don't make exceptions for people, okay? So being willing to listen, being predictable, being fair, that's actually the best way to get students to accept your program. At least going along with you long enough that maybe they'll start seeing the benefits of it. Okay? Is that helpful, Greg? Okay. Okay. We will keep thinking about this some more. Okay? Now, I said that capitalism has 2 contradictions. And the first was providing ideological training without at the same time providing the tools for economic advancement. And capitalism has been enormously successful at that. The second contradiction, and this is especially true at the elite institutions, especially at, say, Princeton, where I was, is to give you enough training that you can be an effective servant of the ruling class. Train in terms of your critical thinking, your writing skills, your presentation skills, your mathematical skills, the skills that you need to be an effective servant of the ruling class, but not so effective that you're going to challenge the ruling class. Okay? Now, I'd say this contradiction becomes more acute all the time as American industry more and more needs creative thinkers, out-of-the-box thinkers, innovative thinkers. But not so creative, you start challenging the system. Not that creative. Okay, to become creative within certain defined boundaries. Okay? It's kind of like the way our political system works is very active, wild, crazy, acrimonious debate within very strict boundaries. Okay, you can debate all you want, but you don't go outside of those boundaries. Okay? In a sense, it's kind of a contradiction training people to debate vigorously within boundaries and think that they're never going to overstep those boundaries. Okay? Now, it sounds like something, Al, it was great to meet you.
Okay, good to meet you. Sorry, I have to catch public transportation.
That's fine, okay?
All right.
Now, I'd say in this way, capitalism has also been very successful, okay? And I say this especially if we look at the kind of professorial class who are very creative, very innovative, debate very acrimoniously, but very rarely challenge the capitalist nationalist system, which is really an amazing accomplishment. Okay, and you have to think about it seriously. How is it that professors don't overthrow the government? Okay, well, why not? Okay, we're very critical thinkers, we're excellent scholars, we're very good writers, we're very good speakers, many of us are very good at organizing, okay? And how is it that we don't overthrow the government? Okay, which actually has been an issue in higher education since University of Paris in the 12th century, is how the state would keep that from happening. How you would have this concentration of highly educated people, but they would not overthrow the system. Yeah, Will?
Well, it seems in one way that the people that have that kind of knowledge and things like that, if they did get to, I would guess, threatening of the stability of the state.
Yeah.
And one example, they made Plato a martyr for that in a way. I mean, in ancient Greece. I mean, they didn't like what he was teaching, so they made him kill himself.
Socrates.
Oh, Socrates, yes, you're right. I'm so sorry. I thought it was Plato, but no, you're right.
That has been an objective of the state ever since then, to keep Socrates from happening. Okay?
That's the irony of it.
And I'd say that what I call the capitalist nationalist system has been very successful in that regard, okay, which is a whole other discussion, okay, about how is it that was accomplished, how is it that continues to be accomplished, okay, which is connect with why there's been no workers' revolution in the U.S. We could ask why it is that there's been no revolution of professors, or no workers' revolution backed by professors. Okay, those are all accomplishments of the capitalist system. Yeah, Greg?
I think there's two main points. One is ideological and one is political economy and state power. The ideological aspect is narrowing the fields of scholarship so narrowly and having such stringent requirements on them that professors are put into it, right? I mean, to become a tenured professor, you need service,
Right.
and which doesn't mean like doing service for your community. It means service for the university, which
That's
means sitting on boards, denying funding for this department but giving it to that department, and being very reasonable and rational about how to build our institution as a business.
Explaining why there's no scholarships for undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
The second is publishing, which is almost exclusively either through university presses, which are highly ideologically controlled,
Okay.
or through peer-reviewed journals, which have a sort of self-policing aspect, and are also by and large, are incredibly narrow,
Okay.
incredibly focused, incredibly specific.
Okay.
And then, teaching, which is to show that you are, a good servant
Okay.
of the institution, and
Right,
you get
okay.
positive reviews. So that's sort of the ideological aspect.
Okay.
But then there's also the state power aspect, which is to be a tenured professor at a high-level institution is incredibly lucrative.
Yes.
And this is just coming from someone who does hard manual labor.
Right,
Like
yeah.
I get steel thrown in my legs and
Yeah,
whatnot.
okay, I understand. Yeah.
It's incredibly easy. It's a very comfortable life. And so the
Uh-huh.
price that the ruling class pays for
Okay.
complacency is to make those high tier level positions
Okay.
so lucrative that they're bought off.
Right. Co-opted. Yeah.
And then when there is a professor revolution, you have UNAM in Mexico where they roll in the tanks and start bombing the university. So that's the state power kind of aspect that I think work in tandem.
Okay. No, I'm agreeing with everything you said. Okay. You have to think about how far we are from the tanks rolling onto the university. okay? I mean, you can't even get, I'd like to see it happen. It's kind of what I'm saying, okay? I mean, I'd like to see actually such a high level of consciousness and organization and commitment on the part of professors that the state is forced to send tanks onto campuses, okay? Which has happened, okay, like at UNAM and other places, okay? I was teaching at the University of Botswana when tanks came onto campus, okay? The first set of points you made are the most important, okay? Is that professors are kept very busy and preoccupied with other things that are not leading to their engaging in revolutionary activity, okay? I'm just seconds there, okay? Because I want to mention one other thing. We talked about teaching, okay? And how so you get positive reviews, okay? If you get a bunch of professors together and they start talking, it's not long till they start talking about their student evaluations. It's not long, okay? And this is a big thing in Teaching Academy, is how to not let that conversation happen. How to not let it get turned into a whine fest of everyone complaining and crying, literally crying about the student evaluations. How we try hard to not let that happen, okay? Because it really is not effective for growth as a teacher, okay? Is that, this is kind of, I'd say, the main way in which professors are preoccupied is by worrying about the student evaluations, okay? And actually, this was, just like compulsory education had the explicit purpose of ideological indoctrination, the explicit purpose of student evaluations was to give professors something to worry about besides overthrowing the state. Okay? It was, okay? That's how it was started in the 1960s. It was not an initiative of students. It still is not an initiative of students. It's the initiative of administration. Okay? I mean, this is why, for example, at the U and now at UVU, is you can't see your grades until you do the student evaluation. It's not students who demand it, it's administrators who demand it. That is supposed to, what is supposed to occupy our mind, is our bad student evaluations. Okay, our students who are complaining, literally, our students who are complaining that this guy, Dr. Emerman, is trying to make us think. It's an exact quote. Okay. You can read this quote, okay? If you like to think for yourself, you better not take Dr. Emerman's class. That's not right, my professor. Okay, I mean that's kind of how our mind is occupied in the way that Greg was talking about. Okay, I'm sorry, I know many people wanted to talk. Okay, Sarah.
I was just gonna clarify. So, in your opinion, and I agree, that it's more through the preoccupation of professors than the pacification. So, like Greg kind of mentioned, is that professors are the reason professors don't typically get revolutionized or totally politicized is because they're given like a cushy salary and cushy job, you know. So much so that it's instead of starting revolution, they just they back up. But instead, what you're saying is they're preoccupied by obligation to good student reviews and adjunct professors who work a billion hours and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Is it one more than the other, or?
I would say that by and large, the professorial class is not yet at that level.
Yeah.
Thinking, wow, if I speak out, I might lose this cushy job and have to do real work like Greg and Sarah. Okay?
Yeah.
Most are not at that level.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them there.
Okay.
I'd like to see them at that level and then see the level where they start ordering tanks onto campus.
Yeah.
Okay, to quell these rabble-rousing professors.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like what, I forgot your name.
Greg.
Greg was talking about earlier, that you have this policeman in your head
Yeah.
who's actually way more effective than the policeman with a stick,
Yeah.
okay? And you're not even gonna see that stick till you've gotten the policeman out of your head,
Yeah.
okay? There's some other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question, I guess.
Please.
So with student reviews, is that kind of like, depending like on a rating system, like how bad, the students rate you versus how positive, that the ones that are rated the most, like, I guess the most negatively rated ones, they lose their position, or?
Okay, kind of a bit of both, and we're depending upon the university, are you adjunct, are you not, are you tenured, are you not, et cetera, okay? I'd say, actually, by and large, when, you know, someone is not tenured, they wanna get tenure, how good your evaluations are gonna be a big part of whether you get tenure, okay? So whether you can even keep your job, it depends a lot upon your reviews, okay? And this is what will worry many teachers about changing their teaching style. Taking on things like learner-centered teaching is the kind of bad reviews they're going to get. I mean, the kind of resistance that will be expressed in bad reviews, okay? But I'd say even beyond that, actually even more important, is the way it affects people personally, emotionally, okay? To end the semester read scathing reviews, okay? Even reading 39 positive reviews and one scathing one, how that affects you emotionally. Okay, so I said, you get a group professor together, it's not long, that's what they're talking about. Oh, this thing so-and-so wrote, and I was up all night, and I was crying, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? I mean, I'd say actually this kind of mental preoccupation with reviews is kind of a level that most professors haven't gotten above. Okay? Anyway, I'm now prepared to say some positive things. Okay? So this is really what I want to talk about is how does one engage in university education for the purpose of the revolutionary transformation of society? Okay? So in terms of all the problems I've talked about, resistance from fellow professors, resistance from students, how does one accomplish this? Okay? So there's three ideas I want to talk about, okay? The first idea is this word ideology. You have to hammer that word, okay? Meaning you have to name the word, okay? You have to tell students this is what ideology means, and please can you come up with an example of that, okay? Can you come up with a situation in which someone has an illegitimate, excessive amount of power and privilege? And you ask people, why do they have that and what did they say? Okay, what are the things that people say that justify someone else having an excessive amount of power and privilege? Okay, and you have to explain that. The word for that is ideology. Okay? Now, it's really amazing how difficult it is to teach people this word. Okay? And this is actually part of an effective ideological indoctrination, is exactly what Greg was saying. Greg was saying is that it's a worldview you don't even know you have. Okay? So people don't even realize that there's such a thing. They don't even realize that there's such a thing as ideology. Okay? But to explain what it is and to have people finally eventually come up with examples is a very difficult thing, but very, very worthwhile thing to do. Okay? Amazingly difficult. Many discussions we have in I teach environmental management, was basically in sort of an engineering program at UVU, and we do a lot with problem solving, and usually start with students' immediate problems. What is the problem? Oh, parking permits cost so much. We're going to analyze this. Why do they cost so much? And how long it takes till someone finally, eventually realizes that part of the reason parking permits cost so much is there's no student input into the decision making. It takes a long time to reach that point, and then for people to realize, well, why is there no student input? Well, then maybe students ought to have some input. It's just a really long process to get to that. And the other thing is, to really point out when someone has said something ideological, to really name that is very important. Now, when we give examples of ideological statements, anytime someone says something is obvious or something is simple or something is clear, that's an ideological statement by itself, okay? Because nothing is obvious, nothing is simple, nothing is clear. Everything must be analyzed in detail and fully explained and justified in detail. Okay, to say that something is obvious, well, that's part of the ideology, that there's things are obvious, okay? Like it's obvious that everybody will just work for their own good. Well, no, it's not obvious. You have to explain why do people say that, and is it true, and when is it true? Okay, I always tell people anytime you say the words obvious or simple, you should start coughing uncontrollably, okay, and realize what it is that you've just said. The other part of, I mean, as I said, a key part of ideology is not seeing any alternatives or having a very limited number of alternatives, especially having two choices. Okay, it's always people say there's two choices and one of them is completely unpalatable. Okay, it's like either the U.S. has to be in Iraq or we will succumb to Islamic domination. Okay, well, sorry, there aren't just two choices. Okay, it's always like, do you want a hamburger or do you want a brick? Okay, there aren't always just two choices. Okay, that's actually a logical dilemma called Morton's fork. Okay, to say there's two choices and only one of them makes sense. Well, it's never that way. That's an ideological statement to say there's two alternatives, or there's three, or there's four, or there's any limited number of alternatives. Okay, so the main thing is to really name that word ideology and to point it out and to help people to understand that and to come up with their own examples. Now, the next thing, which is even more important, is the key part of ideology is the suppression of imagination. That is, you cannot even imagine that there's any alternatives to the way society acts at the present time. That's just the way it is. You can't even see how it could be different, okay? Like, there's a vice president, I assume at SLCC, who says there's no scholarships for undocumented workers. Okay, well, there's no alternative to that. It's one person who makes this decision. How is that? You couldn't have SLCC run in any kind of different way? Okay, well, if you can't even imagine that, you can't imagine how things could be different, then how do you ever work towards any changes? Okay, and I would say this is the next most important part of using education for revolutionary transformation is the promotion of imagination. That is the promotion of imagining, seeing things different than the way they are now, okay? So I try to do a lot of kind of problem solving, problem posing that really requires a lot of imagination. Like an example, in geology, teaching, here's the theory of continental drift. Here's the evidence of continental drift. Now just try to imagine what new evidence might appear in the future that will cause you to question continental drift. What would have to be found that would make you think, wait a minute, continental drift, I'm not so sure anymore, okay? It's amazingly difficult exercise because you'll have most students simply saying, but there is continental drift. We've been taught there's continental drift. There's evidence for continental drift. Well, I know that, but I'm just imagine what might happen that will cause you to question that, okay? It's very difficult, but it's worthwhile keep promoting that kind of exercise, this kind of use and imagination. Just take a present situation and can we imagine how it might be different? I'm going to say that's the next most important thing. But I'm going to say, yes, Adrian.
I was gonna say, I just had a thought, it might not be very logical, but just a thought.
Yeah.
That maybe that thing, the new idea that could challenge the idea of continental drift would say maybe the continents are getting pulled magnetically, and it's not by tectonic plates, it's by electromagnetic. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, okay. And I would say actually, it's what some students say. It's not completely the answer to the question, okay? Because what I'm asking for is what new discovery might be made. what bone might be found, what fossil might be found, what rock might be found, okay? Which is a different matter than saying, how can we take the current evidence and come up with a different explanation for current evidence, which would also be a fine question, okay? Anyway, I like the way you're thinking about this, okay? Now, the last thing, most important of all, is I would say a part of using higher education for revolutionary purposes is the promotion of teamwork, okay? Because you have students who've gone through a long educational experience being taught to work by themselves, rely on themselves, work for their own benefit. And I think, how are you guys gonna make a revolution if you can't work together? Okay, what is any one of you gonna accomplish by yourselves, okay? Versus what can you accomplish as a whole group, as a team, as an organization, okay? I mean, students will often say, well, yes, Erin?
I was just gonna say that I feel like there's an effort in higher education to make people work as a team, but I feel like people are never really taught to work as a team. So
That's
instead of teaching people how to work collaboratively, it's like, here, do a group project, and then one person does it all and throws it just never works out because nobody else knows how to work effectively as a team.
Okay, right. So what you're doing is you're giving students yet one more experience in the ineffectiveness of teamwork.
Exactly.
Okay, which is actually teaching the opposite of teamwork.
Yeah.
Teaching avoid a team whenever possible.
Yeah.
Accomplish what you can by yourself whenever possible. Okay? So what you say is exactly right, okay? Is that no one's born knowing how to work as a team. Right? You learn that. You learn that. You gotta be taught that. You gotta be taught how to work as a team.
Well, and nor are we taught to work as a team. Definitely.
Okay.
Which might be an effective strategy of, Okay.
Okay.
You know.
I'm gonna say that in terms of using education for revolutionary purposes, that is the most important thing of all. Okay? Is teaching people how do you work as part of a team. Okay? Which is a completely different matter than just assigning a project to a team, which is the opposite.
Yeah.
Teaching people how to work as a team. Okay? Because I have been shocked at how poorly people work as a team. Okay? Especially after insisting that they want to work as a team. I was once quite overwhelmed on this teaching a field camp one summer. So you have students who work together for 3 weeks, and then I had them for the 4th week. Okay? So they get along fine, but working together, it's like students are collecting rocks, we're going to analyze them in the lab. Wait a minute, you guys collected more rocks than this. Where are they? Who is in charge of keeping track of all of the rocks? Okay? And then students are writing a report in a lab. Wait a minute, you two look like you're writing the same section. Are you working together? Are you working across purposes? Okay, and then a team of 5, and I got 2 versions of the report. Well, wait a minute, who is in charge of putting together the final report? Yeah, Will?
I think a lot of it comes down essentially with teamwork or taught in school, because when I was in high school, I was in this thing called the Integrated Pathway, and they taught us how to try to function as a team.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Each individual person was given a responsibility in their team, and that was all that they had to do to try to earn their grade, basically. But in doing that, it took out the elements of communication entirely.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the biggest parts that's lapsed, and
Okay.
the idea of teamwork is that there's no communication.
Okay. I would say that was not part of working as a team. Okay, I would say it's part of it, but it's so far from the whole thing.
Right.
Okay, there's a time to divide up tasks, and you go on your own and you do your task.
Right.
There's a time when we all have to brainstorm together and come up with as many ideas as possible, and then decide which ones we want to pursue. Okay, there's a time to do each of these, and part of being an effective team is knowing when to do each one of those. Okay, now, this is kind of agreeing with Sarah was saying, well, you have to teach people how to work as a team, okay? A way to do that, and also this is one thing we do in teaching academy, okay, is that you have to devote class time to meeting as a team and working as a team, and the professor has to role model at least initially, what does it mean to be leader of the team? Okay? To say this is the task we have to accomplish. Okay? Like, you know, my classes, we always do community service projects. Okay, I actually solve a community problem. Okay, in water management, which is what I teach. Okay, so kind of a first task is we're going to find a community partner we're going to work with. Okay, everyone's going to come up with maybe 5 possibilities. Each of them, and they'll talk to each of these 5 people. Then next meeting, everybody reports. Here's all the people we've talked to. Let's narrow it down to 3. Okay, we've done that. Now, as a team, each of us meets with each one of those 3 people. Then we meet again. Then we decide, now which of those projects do we want to pursue? Okay? I mean, there's a time when we work separately, there's a time when we work together, but you have to teach people to do that. Okay? You have to teach people there's certain key responsibilities on this team and who is in charge of that responsibility. Okay? Like in field camp, there is the person who is in charge of the rocks. And who is that person? Okay? There's the person who's in charge of all the data, who knows where all the data is, what kind of data is, can produce it on demand. Now, who is that person? Okay? It's what we call in Spanish the responsable. Okay, the person who's in charge of something. Okay? I mean, there's many things to it, but you have to teach people how to work as a team. Okay? So kind of summarize it, kind of 3 what I call key aspects of revolutionary teaching is naming ideology, talking about ideology, calling someone out on their ideology. Second, promoting imagination. And third, promotion of teamwork is what I think are the 3 most important things. Okay? Now, you want to join me, Greg? Please.
Sure.
Okay. And why don't you just kind of pull up that chair and join me, okay? Okay, and so the thing, Greg, is that I know you do have some educational program, okay? And I'm glad to see it, I'm very supportive of it, okay? I often see like the events on Facebook and so on, okay? And it's like I want to come to it, but I don't want to end up taking over. Okay, so I kind of, well, no, those guys, let them do this on their own, okay? But I have been teaching for almost 30 years now, okay? So I just wanted to, maybe there's some things that might help you out, okay? So I just want to ask you some questions first, okay? So first of all, you're reading up revolutionary books. What's your overall objective? What do you want to accomplish with this?
Well, every time we read something, there are usually 2 objectives. The one, and it's primarily the stated objective, which I think is good, is to have a background knowledge of just, again, facts and concepts. What is capitalism? Who are the proletariat? What is imperialism, et cetera, et cetera. But there's other aspects that go into it. For example, the selection of work. So usually there's a pressing problem or a pressing issue that it seems as though we're just reading the classics, right? Marx, Lenin, Mao, Stalin. But usually there's actually a lot of forethought into which work we're reading when.
Based upon the revolutionary work you're doing.
Yeah, either like practically or internationally, right?
Okay.
If there's a threat of U.S. invasion in Syria, then we read imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, and the question is, well, how does this play to Syria? How do corporations function in this process? What does Lenin say about it? Do we think that's still true? Do we think that's not true? What's different? What's the same?
Okay.
If I'm in a group that's overly philosophical, we read Mao's On Practice. If I read a group where people fight too much, they enjoy getting in Facebook battles and criticizing other people, we read On the Correct Handling of Contradictions Among the People. Where it's about not making contradictions antagonistic and developing them in a non-antagonistic way.
Okay.
So there's always like it's good to know the classics in an abstract way that everyone seems to agree with. I frequently tell people, they're like, I don't know enough theory, and there's plenty of people in this room who can vouch for this. They're like, I don't know enough theory, and I'm like, no, you know plenty of theory. You don't need to read a bunch of books from dead people to know theory. But there is like this golden calf of theory of I read this and that and that. And people are interested in that.
Yeah.
But for me, the real goal is what's the concrete thing that's happening here in Utah, happening in the world, happening in the nation, and how can that work as a framework for discussing it?
Okay, right. So all of this is excellent. Okay, I'd say you need two objectives, but I would say them as one objective. Okay, is that the objective of the educational program is to provide the theoretical and historical knowledge necessary for effective political work. Okay, this is really kind of a combined objective. Okay, and then so certainly I support this objective. Okay, so then the next question is, how is the objective being addressed? How are you trying to accomplish this? Okay, how are you trying to promote people gaining this necessary political, theoretical, historical knowledge?
Well, again, context really matters. You know, if it's an open group, often we'll treat it as like just an open book group. Come with 3 questions, and we'll discuss it as a group.
Okay.
I prefer, oftentimes people come to the thing, they're like, I have 3 questions for you. I go, well, you don't have 3 questions for me, you have 3 questions for the group. And we'll talk through it, and I mean, you know, you'll notice that I obviously am interested in what you have to say. I have a lot to say about what you've had to say, but also I didn't really raise my hand, or, you know, I listened very attentively, because people learn better when they're actively engaged and when it's a group discussion. So that's one aspect I do. The other aspect is I provide materials. But I have outlines on the classics of Marx, Lenin, and Mao, and I send them to people and I say, like for example, Lenin is a very dense writer, he's a very actively engaged writer, so no one cares what Comrade Axelrod thought about the third period in 1905. So I try to distill, I have an outline, I present it to people, I say, here's a strategy if you're having trouble reading it. Read the outline, it's general concepts, read Lenin, see if you agree or disagree with the outline, and let's give feedback and see what other people think. And it's very bullet pointy, not like in depth. This is what it means. And then we meet. I prepare some questions. I ask people to bring questions. And then again, if it's not just an open study group, we meet with a very specific reason. We came up with a reason why we're reading this book or this document. We want it to address our pressing political work that we've decided we want to address. We think this is important. So we're going to read this and discuss how it applies or doesn't apply to our work. And we're going to come up with a concrete plan with this informing us. So those are the 2 kinds of groups I generally run. One is more traditional, book clubby, academic. And then if people are like, I'm really interested in this issue, we need to do something about this, then it's like, let's find a specific document or book or writer and address it. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
I see. Okay. So, no, I understand. Okay. So, what would you say are the main problems?
Oh yeah. So there's this great thing on Facebook. There's the facepalm Lenin. Maybe you've seen it going around.
Yeah.
And it's this drawn picture of Lenin, and he's going like this.
Yeah.
And it's like very stylized, and it says, "So comrades, no one did the reading." And everyone laughs because A, they've probably seen it, and B, they've probably either been to study groups where people don't do the readings, or they, or they didn't do the readings. That's a certain sort of problem. But then what we do is we say, well, who read anything? And sometimes hands go up, sometimes they don't, and then we just say, okay, well, let's discuss, what you guys think about what you read. What are interesting ideas? What did you want to learn from this, even if you were busy and had school or work and didn't have time to do with it? What did you hope to learn? What did you hope to see? And so that's kind of like one of the aspects that's like a major problem. Yeah.
Let me see if I can say something helpful.
I'm sure you can.
Okay. I'm sure Comrade Lenin did say that. I can't say what words he used, but I'm sure it came up. Okay. This whole concept of doing the reading reading, okay, it is kind of a very vague, okay? It's like, what does that even mean, do the reading, okay? There's many different things to different people, okay? One person skims it, one person looks at it, one person reads it like it's a fairy tale, okay? One person tries to memorize it, okay? It's like, it's not really obvious what that means to do the reading, okay? Now, I just want to make a suggestion for you, okay? And because I think you know what you want people to do by doing the reading. You want to think about it, right? So you're asking, come up with 3 questions. Well, you've thought about it, at least enough that you've come up with 3 questions, okay? Here's just something that you could consider, okay? You could take something that your group is reading, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, okay, which is not simple reading, okay? But take some passage or paragraph that you think is really key, okay? And to propose a question about it, okay? And a question could be something like, can you think of an example of this? Can you think of a present day example? Can you explain what he means by this? Or now he says this, but 5 pages back he said this. How can both of those be true? Something people to think about, okay? What I found very worthwhile is actually what people call just-in-time teaching, okay? Where you post, okay, we're gonna read this, you post the question. Facebook is great for this. You post the question, people post a response maybe an hour before you meet, okay? Now, what's interesting is, first of all, everyone has thought about it. They thought about it. They always post like an hour before, okay? Exactly when you say to post, okay? But which is good. They thought about it right before the meeting, okay? And even if someone can't get through the whole reading, well, they certainly have read what you had already decided was something key, okay? Also, for your standpoint, wherever the leader is, before the meeting, you're going to read these responses. Wow, you thought that? What do you mean by that? Wow, we never thought about it this way, okay? So you're actually coming into the meeting, the discussion, really thinking very hard about the reading, and everyone else has just thought about the reading. It's kind of getting it all, you're sort of starting at a higher level than just, anyone have any questions, anyone do the reading. You're sort of like pumped up more. It's like it's getting the session a little more energized, okay? It's just something you could consider, okay? Because it's, among serious people, it's practiced more and more in higher education, okay? Otherwise, I'm sure Landon said, did you guys do the reading? Okay. Okay, tell me some more.
Well, I mean, this is what's kind of difficult, because I don't, especially among the revolutionary left, you know, I'll be a little coarse about it. It's absolutely vital.
Coarse?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. You know, what's absolutely vital is what Comrade Jerkoff said in 1914 about some factory in some godforsaken part of, you know, Prussia. Is now the answer to what we are supposed to engage in student work.
Or someone who says they're an anarchist and all you have to say is Kronstadt, and that solves everything.
Right. So, I mean, I guess, you know, I'll just be honest, and now it's on camera for the rest of the world. So that's great. You know, I want people to do the readings, and people do the readings. People get interested in stuff in their own time, and in their own ways. A wonderful comrade that I know from down south, you know, he just said, you know, I'm really interested in Marxism and organizing, you know, and you know, he was interested and participated and whatnot. And he's like, yeah, but what I've got to do is I've got to read through Capital Volume 1 and then watch every David Harvey lecture before and after each chapter and go through it. And I'm like, well, that's good. I'm not going to dissuade you from doing that, but I don't think that's vital. I mean, to put it really bluntly is whenever I have readings, whenever I have meetings, by and large, I want what I want. And I want to get what I want, and which is usually for people to be
active,
Right.
engaged,
Uh-huh.
and carrying out the struggle.
Uh-huh.
So if, they didn't read through 90 pages about how much electricity or railroad Germany owns,
Uh-huh.
I don't think that's as vital as people understanding that there are large corporations that have vested interests in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
So even if nobody does the reading, I'll do like a 10-minute introduction of what I thought was important, and then I'll say, what do you do about that? Again, I'd like to have, I'll say this. I come from a bad background. I come from an academic, philosophical background,
Uh-huh.
and it's inclined to book worship. And
I thought you were connected with Panchavia.
how did I meet you? Well, I went to school at an academic institution and, did philosophy and, taught people ethics and, all of the practices I learned there were incredibly unhelpful for everything. Not all, but most were incredibly unhelpful. So rather than scowling at everybody, which I still do from time to time, but I try to clamp down on my inclination to have these drawn out philosophical discussions about text where we isolate a passage and are like, okay, now what does he mean by this? Because that's what a lot of philosophy does. You pick a quote by a philosopher, you say, introduce it, and then say what it means. So for me, it's more interested that people are politically engaged and then can take those ideas out to the work that they're doing. I don't know. I hope that's not like a dodge, but
No. I'll tell you something, okay? Since we're like laying it all out on camera, okay? When I first encountered Revolutionary Students Union Group at UVU, I at first did not think of it as a political group, okay? It really seemed to me sort of a historical reenactment group, okay? That is, let's all pretend like we're a student Communist Party group at City College of New York in the 1930s, okay? It just seemed more like that, okay? That is, well, historical reenactment is the best way I can put it, okay? It just kind of seemed that way, okay? And it seemed okay a little bit. I was hoping people really wouldn't get stuck there, okay? And I could see kind of endless discussions about what Trotsky meant by this and that, okay, is really going to be counterproductive, okay? I think most discussion about Trotsky is going to be counterproductive. Whether you're for or against him, okay, I think most discussion is going to be counterproductive, okay? I think it's important to kind of name what you see people as doing, okay? Because theoretical discussion and historical discussion can be a way to avoid political action, okay? People could engage in that because they're afraid of doing political action, okay? And I think when you see it that way, when anyone sees it that way, it's important to name it, okay? It seems to me we are having this discussion as a way of avoiding political action. Or how is this discussion going to influence our next political action or promote political action or lead to further political action, okay? I can see there's a theoretical discussion that could be harmful. Because you said your objective is to provide the political, theoretical knowledge necessary for political work. You could have the opposite happening, okay? So I think discussions in some way need to be managed carefully, okay? I'm a little concerned about having kind of a free-for-all of everybody come up with 3 questions. Okay, first of all, 8 people, 3 questions, that's 24 questions right there, okay? Maybe it's the role, because I mean, there's a leader of the group, facilitator of the group, he or she's got a job to do, okay? Maybe it's more appropriate for you to come up with, here are 3 questions we want to consider, okay? This is Lenin's view of imperialism. How could we understand this situation, what Obama, Kerry, et cetera, how can we understand what they said in terms of Lenin's framework, okay? So that, I mean, that's actually a understanding that's gonna lead to some action, okay? I'm concerned about throwing things too open, is saying everyone come up with 3 questions, okay? There's kind of a balance between promoting growth and kind of letting a discussion turn into a free-for-all that's actually working against growth. Okay, I'm just kind of thinking about that, okay?
Yeah, and again, as a self-criticism, I often am, ironically, given what most people think of me, I'm actually too loose with the discussions.
I think you probably are.
Yeah, it's certainly true. And if I could, just real quick,
Yeah.
go back to the Reenactment Society thing.
Uh-huh.
We were always very dedicated.
Uh-huh.
You know, we had a million different committees where we were trying a million different things.
Yeah.
But I think you're missing the central fact,
Okay.
which is we had no idea what the fuck we were doing at all, in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
So I don't in any way want to, like what you said is probably pretty accurate. But it wasn't out of a let's avoid political discussion, or, you know, because we see reenactment societies all the time around Trotsky, around anarchism, around Stalinism, around Mao.
Okay.
But I just want to say, like, part of the problem, and this is why the political discussion of, like, how do we apply this to the work, is because we spent years,
I see.
years,
Uh-huh.
having these endless back and forth discussions, which, interestingly enough, almost completely ceased when we found the ability and began gaining the skills to actually do political work.
Uh-huh.
And then suddenly everyone of diverse ideologies were united around immigrant struggles.
Okay, well,
You
this makes more sense to me, okay? Because when I was a student, we didn't really have groups called, with names like Revolutionary Students Union, okay? They'd be kind of organized around an issue, okay? Like, we are the People's Front for the Liberation of South Africa, okay? We're just organized around divestment issues and so on, okay? So the organization from the beginning was organized around some issue, okay? To start off saying that our goal is the revolutionary transformation of our society. Okay, now how do we do this? How do we get started? What's our first step here? Okay, I mean that would be tough to get started as an organization. So what you're saying makes perfect sense to you. I mean, nothing really gets going till you have an issue to grab onto. Okay. Yes, sorry, Kyle.
Yeah, I had a comment about.
Please.
When you had the People's Front for the Liberation of South Africa?
Oh, I didn't name it.
What decade was that?
What decade? This would be 1970s.
Okay. I guess it's important not to like defend the Reenactment Society completely, but I think stuff like that is almost necessary, or like a stepping stone, I guess, because in the 1970s and earlier, there were large organizations in most first world countries in the U.S. too that were dedicated to, you know, revolutionary change in society. So people would know about those things, and then they would, you know, go and form like a specific issue group. And I feel like today, those organizations don't exist anymore. And so
yeah.
I feel like if you're trying to start and Marx even has a quote about this, like the battles of today, or the armies of today, are always dressing themselves up in old uniforms or something like that. They're always trying to do, because they're not totally sure of what they're doing today. And I feel like creating a group that's super open-ended and that actually looks like a caricature of an older group is, I mean, it's not ideal, but it's the first step along the path. It's creating something that needs to be there, I guess. It's kind of like wide open.
I would agree with you. I mean, even if it did even look more like a historical reenactment group, okay, I'd still be supportive.
Right.
I just don't want people to get stuck there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, we're just like, you know, we're reenacting a Civil War battle or something.
Well,
okay.
Oh, sorry, if I may.
No, please.
Well, and again, I want to drive home the central point of the founding of the Revolutionary Students Union. We had no idea what the fuck we were doing. If you look at our early pins, it is a star with like a nibbed pen, right? Star in the top corner with a nibbed pen.
Yeah,
in
I know,
Utah.
it's the Nepali Maoists.
It's the
Nice.
All Nepal Revolutionary Students
I
Union.
recognize it right off.
Right, but this is the thing is we had so little knowledge of what we were doing
I see.
that it was like, well, we met with the leader of the All Nepal Revolutionary Students Union. They have Marx, Lenin, and Mao on one wall and the martyrs of the dead students on the other. This is legit, this is real, we
Yeah.
need to make something like this. We have no idea how to do it, so let's try something and see if it works. Which is why, and maybe, I mean, not to derail this, but maybe this would be a good time to ask other people. Almost everyone in this room, not everyone, has attended a study group with me or has been part of this sort of discussion. I mean, I only know what I imagine I'm doing or think that I'm doing, right? As Mark said about ideology, they do it, but they don't know that they do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that's what I attempt to do. But yeah, absolutely, it was a reenactment society. I think it would be more productive. I think people who attended my groups would know it would be more productive if I led them better with more specific questions, thinking about these passages. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
I mean, the question is, because I think the objectives are perfect, excellent, okay? The question is, to what degree are the objectives being met, okay? That is, are people actually engaging in more effective political work because of their experience reading and discussing these texts? Okay, and that's really the question. Okay, please, Will.
I guess, looking back at it, if you don't know where you begin or where you come from, on certain things, you're doomed to repeat something like that's been done before. So, I mean, in one way I can see, having fundamental ideas of, what was in the past and give some ideas on it so people know what, to avoid in going forward. But, I'd say also, it's better to have some idea of what you stand for before you enter any place to take action.
Oh, please, yeah.
Trial and error. Life is about making mistakes. If you don't know what the hell you're doing, then you will learn, at least from experience, from giving it the good old college try.
Well, and people know my favorite quote from a Chicago activist I know, which is, let's not do that again. And I've got a lot of those.
Oh Lord, I'm trying to. Which one is that, by the way?
It's a gentleman who came not too long ago, but that's one of those common phrases that I take out because I have so many things that I won't do that again about. But yeah, I agree with you, trial and error.
It's interesting to read about kind of history of organizations that self-destructed, and then think about how that happened, how you would prevent it from happening, or to read about grand experiments that ended in total annihilation, and how did it happen?
And let's be very blunt, especially for the darker days. Especially credit to the brother running the camera. Part of the reason this organization survived is just the ruthless tenacity of the core people involved that refused to let it die. So, there, especially as we were getting out of the dark years, the early years, depending on how you view it.
When did it start?
Let's see, I went to Nepal in 2008, so 2000, is that right, 2008? I don't know, the years kind of blend together. 2008 is when I went to Nepal.
I wish I'd known you were there, I was there too.
Yeah, I think we talked about this very briefly. And then the Revolutionary Students Union was formed a month within the training from Nepal.
Oh, okay, because I started UVU fall of 2008, so about the same time.
Yeah, and so we came back, we said we have to do something. When we talked to the Nepali Maoists, we asked what was the best way we could help. We said to stop U.S. imperialism from strangling our revolution in its cradle, go back to your own country and stop US imperialism. I said, all right, that's what we're gonna do. And then a month later, we had the RSU. But yeah, I mean, I don't accredit it to our skill or leadership or intelligence, but just through, savage tenacity that refuses to quit, of which the brother is certainly one of, if not the most.
I would say it's actually because we're willing to learn from our experiences that our organization persisted. Because if it was just like I don't know if anybody knows this, but when we first started our organization, we had 2 lectures every meeting. We had a history lecture and then we had a theory lecture.
I remember.
And our meetings almost never be shorter than 3.5 hours. Which we did draw for some of the lectures, some people, but we were never even really able to even get in touch with the type of work that we wanted to do until we actually just started to move out and do action itself.
I spent 6 months trying to contact unions in Utah and the AFL-CIO to help push for EFCA. And in fact, I had an entire committee of like 4 people who tried to do that. And one of the people actually was in tears, called me because they yelled at me. They said, don't bother us about EFCA. I think they were calling me SCIU at the time. But this was right after Obama was elected. And I mean, that's the kind of, we're like, we support labor, so let's contact the unions, and we just have no idea what we're doing, so we bounce from thing to thing. But yeah, no, the brother's right. Some of the hard lessons took longer to learn. But I mean, tying it a little bit back to education, for me, practice is really where education comes from. I'll take somebody who organizes a pro-Palestine rally or helps organize a workplace, even if they're functionally illiterate, I'll take that over the innumerable and great, interesting people. I won't name names on camera, but you know them. Autonomous Marxists and, all sorts of variety of Marxists and whatnot, and post-Marxists. I take somebody who's functionally illiterate, who couldn't read the Communist Manifesto, who can understand the fight for the working class, right? Doesn't have that ideology. Is just pissed off at the boss, and someone who can give me an in-depth distinction between Zizekian ideology, Habermas, and the various hermeneutics of ideology, and so, I agree that, it's the engagement that's really vital for me, and that's what I want the study groups to do, is I want, a brother here, we studied the Revolutionary Armed Forces, Revolutionary Social Change in Colombia. It's about the Revolutionary Armed Forces in Colombia. And why? Well, I think the brother can talk to what he got out of the book, but also part of the objective, and now I'll say this on camera, was to show that there is still Marxist-Leninist organizations to combat what was prevailing at the time, which was, Marxism is all dogmatic Stalinism, right? Marxism means you do what the leader tells you. And that, struggle is still alive in this world and can be pulled out by uniting with the people. That's why I lent you my book. But I wonder, it's an open question if you want to talk about it. How effective were those lessons that I didn't ever tell you about? What were the goals? Because we had conversations where you were raising questions. I mean, does this sound right, or is that just kind of my memory distorting?
Yeah, I think at the point when you gave me that book, I was like very much like coming at it from I was very new to communism. I had the idea that like Marxism was dead, kind of that it was the end of history, almost, that concept. And it was hard for me to see that like the struggle was alive in any way, because I had a very like America-centric, Eurocentric viewpoint. And I really think that book kind of brought alive to me the notion that revolution is alive and people are struggling, and it kind of helped me expand my horizons there, I guess. Is that kind of what you were asking, or?
I was just asking what you got out of the book, so whatever you got is fine.
Yeah, no,
But apropos to the conversation, just real quick, like I wouldn't just hand that book to everyone. I think it's a great book, and I certainly think everyone should read it. But for me, the pedagogy, right, the method of education is, you know, to talk to people about what they feel like they're having trouble with and give them something and talk through with them what they're doing. And even if they don't do the readings, it's more important that the political problem be solved. So, I don't know, it's completely haphazard and unsystematic. You know, I was actually thinking, are these faculty training courses open to the public, or do you guys do open to the public ones, or?
I guess the simple answer is no.
Fair enough.
No, I think that kind of thing, probably would not work. There was a teaching academy, there still is a teaching academy for all of UVU. And then people in our college science and health felt that we really have particular problems that we need to work on just between us. So we actually have a teaching academy just for our college now. Okay. But what I feel you're talking about is how can political community organizers learn more about teaching, leading discussions, and so on. Okay. There's a book we use, which I like a lot, is called Learner-Centered Teaching by Mary Ellen Weimer. Okay, that kind of lays out all the principles I talked about. Okay. I think reading that book and thinking about how you would apply that in an organization would be worthwhile. Okay, and I certainly would be happy to discuss this with any of you guys. Okay. I think that, I'm just kind of guessing here, okay? A lot of what we do in Teaching Academy is based upon a lot of books written recently about what's known about how people learn in terms of how the brain works. And a lot of this, how the brain works, has not been known before the past couple of decades, okay? I'm guessing a lot of this has not really gotten down to sort of the organization book discussion level. I'm kind of guessing this, okay? That it's probably being taught, even though pretty well and effective in some ways, kind of in an old style college way. This is kind of my guess. Okay. Anyway, the particular teaching academy I think would not be open to outsiders, okay? But I certainly be happy to help out anyone who wanted, okay? I guess you call me brother.
You can call me comrade.
What the comrade was saying earlier, okay, is that we talked about a history lecture and a theory lecture. I mean, kind of what you were reinforcing is that that is actually the least effective way of transmitting information and promoting growth is the lecture, okay? And there's actually thousands of studies demonstrating this fact, okay, which you kind of showed that again, okay, is that, man, it's a lot of lecture. We're not getting too much out of this, okay?
We learn not to do that, just for the record.
No, that's fantastic. It's fantastic if you learn that, okay? Yeah, Kyle?
I think in the context of an organization like the one we have here, where all of us are students and we're trying to teach ourselves in a way.
Yeah.
Even if you do have, I mean, we should constantly change our practice and teach each other better and, you know, learn new techniques. But I think there's in a situation where, like when I'm giving a lecture, I'm like pretending to be the professor. I'm like play acting as the professor for an hour, and I get to you know, read a book and study it and prepare notes and think about, you know, the diagrams I'm going to draw and think about, well, how am I going to take this extremely complicated subject and break it down into parts, you know, and kind of put it on a board and relate it together and share it with other people who have an interest in the same thing. So I think when it's not just a professor who's been through a doctoral program and 20 years of teaching or whatever, but a student body that's just coming in not knowing anything, when everybody is at a similar level, there is a kind of like positive growth aspect to being the person giving the lecture. I guess it's that.
No,
Because I've done it a couple times. It's been like one of the best things I've done in a long time. I get to go up there and have a lot of fun, and I feel like that's, even if I'm not doing it in exactly the right way, it's still like my growth is, I feel like I'm a better person for getting out in front of other people.
Certainly, yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle. I mean, I definitely have not loved it, but like some of the, like the most I've learned on a subject has been when I've had to actually present on it. So, but I think that relies on like that notion of teamwork, where not just one person is giving lectures and presenting the material and asking the questions. It's everybody. Everybody kind of pitches in like information and their teaching style and their that sort of, I mean, and it's not really collaborative, but as a whole I guess it is, if everybody's learning and then presenting their information. So yeah, I think that aspect has been very beneficial to the RSU, is having different people present on subjects that they choose or that the group chooses that they're interested in learning more of. So it kind of forces people to learn about a subject and teach about a subject, and we as a group get to learn a bunch of different stuff from many different teaching styles.
Well, and just building off that, the sister gave a really good presentation with a lively discussion on police brutality. That had people really actively engaged in discussing things and thinking up different problems. So I think, I'm definitely a fan of de-emphasizing the lectures in certain ways. I'm certainly wholeheartedly about not, no offense, not being in front of the camera anymore. There's a whole YouTube channel of which I'm in front. But I think it's very good for everyone, right? I mean, one of the key skills you said is making presentations, writing an essay, thinking critically. Right. And something like this is a place where that can happen. I didn't formulate this in this way, but I literally put together. It says workshop, but really it's a lecture because I'm not very good at it. I'm learning as I go. Right, on revolutionary thinking and revolutionary writing. Because these are key skills that I didn't learn until like the last year of college. I couldn't write, and most, I don't know, does anyone here think that they're a good writer? I mean, you may be, but like writing an essay, I didn't learn until the last year of college how to write something coherent. I could write really good academic garbage that could get A's, but nothing that I could hand to someone and say, here, read this, here's some complicated ideas that'll be clear to you after you read it.
Let me ask you a question. Is there any, in this sort of newer, more responsive and participatory version of teaching, is there any things that are kind of like cuckoo eggs or sort of pitfalls of ways to actually stifle the sort of productivity of participation in a way that actually looks like it is? Because it seems to me like sometimes, and particularly like I see this in the university sometimes, if somebody doesn't have like good lesson plans, they're going to be like, oh, let's open it up and just talk about, me not having a lesson plan today. Or, I mean, because I'm sure we've all had college classes where that's happened, and those have turned out, I think, oftentimes to be enormously unfruitful. That isn't to say that there isn't a right way to do it, but do you have, I mean, since you teach about the right way to do it, there must obviously be things to avoid as well, and I'm wondering, especially in a revolutionary context, things to avoid.
Okay, so there's a way to lead discussion in a way that stifles discussion. Okay. Now, by the way, if I was actually really teaching a class I would actually not be doing what I'm doing now, that is having a whole discussion of the whole group, okay? And I guess I'm doing that because I didn't really know you guys well enough, otherwise, okay? But the thing is that, when you have a discussion of the whole group, okay? First of all, you kind of have one person sort of managing that whole discussion. Okay, kind of deciding who can speak, when they can speak, saying that's good, that's interesting, or not making any response. Okay, so you're kind of evaluating discussions, comments as they happen, okay, and also determining who can speak when, okay? And you'll have many people who don't want to speak because it sounds like I'm standing up and making a speech, not like having a conversation, okay? So it doesn't really necessarily promote an active exchange of ideas, okay? So I would never have I would not have a discussion of the whole class, okay? I mean, usually the way I would teach the class, I want to explain something first of all. I mean, usually what I'm doing is I'm going to respond to the online responses, okay? So here's very interesting things, let me give you a few more things to think about, okay? But usually then the class would engage in some kind of problem solving, but divided into groups, okay? Like groups of 4 or so. And I would kind of circulate among the groups. So there's a lot of discussion happening and I'm kind of not even there. I'm sitting, listening to another group, maybe giving them something to think about or just listening to what they're saying, okay? So I feel like someone could give the appearance of having discussion, but really be stifling it. Okay?
So you're saying like the breaking into small groups, that's a way of...
Of actually promoting discussion.
Okay.
Okay, you have a lot of people who will have a lot more to say in a group of 3 than in a classroom of 40. Okay? I actually thought about doing that here, except I felt like I didn't know you guys well enough, and Sarah had asked me to give a lecture, and I say, I think I'll just kind of do something in between. Okay, I'm sort of answering your question.
I think that is enormously helpful.
Okay.
I kind of wonder though, the type of skills that people have talked they develop through their doing is not necessarily counter what you're saying, but like say for instance the ability to give a presentation where it's very formalized and speaking to a large group and things like that.
Yeah.
Is also the type of skill that would be, or I would think you could at least ease people into by even forcing their participation in that sort of up against the wall, it's time for public humiliation sort of way.
Well, you know, it depends upon the people and your interaction with them, okay? Some people will have plenty to say if you simply say it's your turn to speak. Okay, they're not going to jump in, but it's their turn. Wow, they got plenty to say. That's how some people are. Okay, some people are not going to respond in that way. Okay, that means it kind of takes a while to sort of get to know people. Okay, I mean it's kind of an advantage of having sort of small group discussions and professors circulating among small groups. You kind of watch, observe, listen. You're kind of getting to know people in that way. Okay, anything that turns into public humiliation, well, wow, you have made a bunch of misjudgments if you've kind of gotten to that step.
Oh, I mean, like I'm exaggerating. I'm just saying it's a very stressful thing, which is why public speaking, for instance, is like one of the worst fears of Americans. You know.
Okay. Well, but what you keep in mind that no one's born with a fear of public speaking. That's a learned behavior. Okay.
Good. Like I mean, like good. How do we fix that?
Well, first of all, like it or not, it's easier to teach public speaking in Utah than probably any other place in the world. Okay? I've never been to church. But I hear all of you talking about, oh, you stand up and speak in church. You I'm not sure what all you do, okay? But people seem to have some past history of speaking in church, okay? So people seem to be kind of desensitized to give presentations, okay? I mean, really, the way you, I mean, people acquired a fear of speaking in front of a group long before I met them, okay? They weren't born that way, but they acquired that, they were taught that, okay? I mean, really, the way you get over any fear is you have to desensitize yourself to it, okay? You have to do it enough times that it starts to not be scary anymore, okay? So kind of the worst thing to do is say, oh, you're afraid of speaking, well, then I'll give you something else to do. Well, you're just gonna even more afraid the next time it comes up, okay? I mean, sometimes when students, because in any class I teach, giving a presentation is part of it, okay? And it's usually some kind of critical presentation, okay? Like in Geology 1010, very basic class. I want you to take a geology article from the popular press and critique it in these ways. Okay, I've had students do outstanding critiques of articles from Fox News. Okay, I mean, really showing the agenda that's being promoted in that article. Okay, there's nothing to do with the geology they're talking about, but they're using the geology to promote an agenda, okay? But sometimes students just say, I'm afraid to do this. Okay, let's start with, well, what are you willing to do? Okay, are you willing to give a presentation to me and your best friend? Okay, or to me and your 3 best friends? Okay, what is it you're willing to do? Let's start with that, and then we'll see what happens after that. Okay, but somehow you have to start desensitizing yourself to that fear, okay, which you've been taught to have, okay? I mean, it actually acts in the interest of the capitalist system to have most people afraid to speak in public, right?
Or that it's not their place to speak in public.
Okay, yes.
I mean, it's also
you're right,
absolutely
you're right,
there.
Right, so that's not my place, and I'm afraid to do it, and I'm not gonna do it, and there's other people who can do that, okay? Am I getting anywhere with your
Yes,
question?
absolutely. I think the next question I think would be more
Okay.
like an in tandem question,
Okay,
but I don't know if we want to take like a billion more questions now because it's getting late.
okay.
I find this extremely engaging.
Okay, well, I make a suggestion, okay, is that Sarah or whoever, okay, could make a formal motion to conclude the meeting, okay? Okay, and at that point, people are free, well, I can go home if I want to, but I'll stay and talk to people if they want.
Yeah, I will motion that we conclude the meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay.